to do a quick live and talk Diddy just for a few minutes. Come on in. Like the videos, you guys come in. We're going to talk Diddy. It's being reported that they're seeking 11 years in regards to the Diddy case. Prosecutors. Okay, so we're going to get into what's being talked about. Allow me a few minutes to get into my screen. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk About It Media 21. Where we talk hot topics, trendy topics, what's going on in the world. So, hope it's connecting. Can you guys hear me okay? Press 1. Can you guys hear me okay? Press 1. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk About It Media 21. We're just going to do a quick live and let's talk Diddy and get straight to it. Let me go ahead and do my disclaimer. All comments are alleged, period. Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarships, and research. Fair use is used permitted by copyright, otherwise be infringing. All comments are alleged in our opinion and for entertainment purposes only. Okay, so we're going to get straight to the video in regards to what's going on with Diddy, what people are talking about, and we're going to get straight to it.
Diddy Combs case. Chief Investigative Correspondent Eric Tursky here with the latest. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, George. Federal prosecutors say Sean Combs was violent, abusive, and repentant. So while Combs was acquitted of more serious charges, this morning, federal prosecutors say he still deserves at least 11 years in prison following his conviction on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. That is a far more severe punishment than Combs' attorneys recommend. They cast him as a reformed domestic abuser and are seeking time served, saying anything longer would amount to a perversion of justice. But prosecutors point to hotel security camera video of Combs attacking Cassie Ventura to argue Combs held all the power over people he transported while they ended up bloodied and bruised. They say the sentence should reflect Combs' decades of unchecked violence and the substantial psychological, emotional, and physical damage he has inflicted. Defense attorneys call the government's recommendation draconian, saying it amounts to verdict be damned, lock him up, and throw away the key. Robin's sentencing is set for Friday.
Yes, it is. All right, Aaron, our thanks to you.
Prosecutors are asking for an 11-year prison sentence shortly after midnight, calling Combs unapologetic and saying he continues to blame his victims. One accuser called Combs' abuse degrading. She says she still lives in fear. Sentencing is set for Friday.
Let's continue. Let's continue. Fair use reaction. The videos, you guys come in. Like the videos, you guys come in.
The Thanksgiving turkey sub is back with rich, buttery stuff.
Like the videos, you guys come in. Thanks for being here and thanks for supporting the channel. Let's continue this reaction clip.
Say Sean Diddy Combs deserves more than a decade in prison.
Megan Fuse at the WKRN.com alert gets now the new information ahead of Friday's sentencing. Megan.
Nicole Mark, federal prosecutors said in a new memo Combs should be in prison for at least 11 years, which is far more than what his defense attorneys are asking for. Combs will be sentenced Friday on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. Acquitted of the more serious charges, prosecutors tell the judge punishment for the crimes he was convicted of must take into account the manner in which he committed them. Prosecutors adding he was violent, abusive, and left victims in fear. Meanwhile, Combs' attorneys are seeking a prison sentence of no more than 14 months, amounting to about time served.
A federal judge will decide soon whether to throw out Sean Diddy Combs' prostitution convictions. Now, the hip-hop producer...
So let's give you guys a quick update. Let's continue fair use reaction clip.
is scheduled for sentencing next week after being convicted in July. Combs has been jailed for nearly 13 months already. He remains behind bars, and his lawyers want him sentenced to just 14 months, which would mean immediate release. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York now with us with the latest. So, Alex, what was his demeanor like today?
Well, he was in a great mood today as he entered the courtroom. The hearing lasted a little bit over an hour, but when he came in in a tan jumpsuit, despite the fact he got a court order that was supposed to allow him to wear his own clothes. But he came in this tan jumpsuit, full beard and hair, both gray, but a big smile, happy to see his family members, his twin daughters in the courtroom, as well as some of his other children there. He had a lot of support there, and safe to say that's the last time we saw him, he was much more nervous as he awaited that verdict. This time he looked like there was a huge weight off his shoulders.
And so what did his lawyers say during this appearance?
So this is the last appearance that we have before his sentencing next Friday. And what they're trying to do is essentially get the entire case thrown out to a degree. Remember, he was acquitted on the most serious charges that could have life in prison, this RICO charge, which is racketeering, but also these sex trafficking charges. And that's really important because essentially what his team argued is that because he was found not guilty of sex trafficking, the convictions that he does have are almost rendered moot. What he was convicted of was transportation to engage in prostitution for both Cassie Ventura, for Jane, a woman whose name we do not know. But according to his team, he was convicted under what's called the Mann Act, which is a 1910 act that they say is racist, that has to do with trying to prevent sex trafficking from occurring. But typically, the Mann Act is not really enforced by the Department of Justice unless it's done by an actual commercial business or with the process of sex trafficking. And because of that, he's not a convicted sex trafficker. They're essentially saying that this and they also talk under this Mann Act that they say that the male escorts traveled there willingly, that they were hired through a professional company. Remember, this wasn't some closed door deal. They often called some of these dance companies that would bring over these men who were really just dancers that participated in these sex acts with Cassie Ventura and with Jane. And so under this, they say a lot of this has to do with also the fact that he videotaped most of these sexual acts. And this is where the First Amendment comes into play, something that we didn't think we were going to see discussed about this, Maritza. They say they frame him as a voyeur, saying that really he is an amateur film porn producer and an amateur porn consumer, and that he videotaped and participated in these events through filming them so that he could take these videos home and later watch them. They used examples like the fact that these women wore costumes, that there was mood lighting, that he orchestrated and often told them exactly how to move during these acts. And they essentially said what he was doing was filming pornography for his own personal use. And so they say that this is First Amendment protection, and that because, again, of these other charges that he was acquitted of, that he no longer needs to answer for this transportation to engage in prostitution. And they say that it wasn't actually prostitution.
I have a lot of questions about that, and I'm not a lawyer, so I will leave it to the legal analysts. But I know that his lawyers want him sentenced to just 14 months, but how much time did he face here?
Yeah, Maritza, I was vigorously taking notes. It was very difficult to follow some of the statutes and their arguments that they were making over the course of the hour, but the judge was firing questions at both of these attorneys over the course. And by the way, it was notable, Maureen Comey, who was the lead prosecutor on this case, has been fired, so it was left up to her team to answer all of these questions. So it was interesting to watch them try to pick up the pieces in a way without her being there. Obviously, she was the big presence during much of the trial. Now, he is facing several years in prison. He got away with, or he escaped that potential lifetime charge by being acquitted of the RICO and the sex trafficking charges, but he faces 10 years in prison for each of the transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, as you said, his team wants him to get just 14 months. He's been in there since last September, so by the time he gets his sentence next week, he will be in there for 13 months, they say, with good time, good credit, good behavior, rather, and time served. He would be out immediately. His team, or the government rather, wants to see him in prison for several years. They have not put out their sentencing filing yet, so we don't know exactly how long they're going to ask for, but they have made it very clear that they want to see him in prison for several.
And as we see, they've asked for 11 years. Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip. Good morning, everyone. Please hit the subscribe button as you come in. There's about 134 in the building. Continue to hit the like button. The like should match the views. Let's continue. Fair use. Reaction clip.
More years. One other thing, Maritza, there are a lot of letters in support of Sean Combs from his family, people who worked with him, people he did business with, and from fellow inmates who have been with him for the last 13 months. He started some program where he's offering business advice. There were multiple letters filed yesterday in support of him from those inmates.
Okay, Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller.
Let's continue. Fair use. Reaction clip. Let's continue with the Diddy news and coverage of what's going on. Like the video as you guys come in.
Arguing his convictions should be tossed out. What exactly did his team say? How did he look? What can we expect next? And by the way, this is all in anticipation of next week when he's going to officially be going to happen anymore, and what will that sentence be? Could he be going to prison for the next few years? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Like the video as you guys come in.
Although most legal analysts would suggest that is highly unlikely that that's what he would receive. I will tell you that, but federal prosecutors, they have previously suggested 4 to 5 years in prison. They may ask for even more. Combs' defense team has asked for around 14 months, and after already sitting in federal lockup at the Metropolitan Detention Center since September of 2024, he's...
Good morning, Anonymous. Anonymous. Yes, girl. Tell them hit that like button. Thanks for being here. Good morning, Anonymous. Some of my favorites is Anonymous and Paris. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hit that like, you guys. Let's continue. Fair use. Reaction clip.
Has been denied bail. If the judge sides with the defense's recommendation, then Combs would be essentially released immediately. And by the way, just real quick, we're going to talk about what happened today, but I want to highlight something about the sentencing before we talk about what happened today. So his attorneys submitted a 182-page sentencing memo laying out their argument for a lesser sentence. They go into Combs' history and upbringing by discussing how his father was shot to death, that this had a tremendous impact on Sean Combs' life, how he has had this dedication to his family and career and built a family for his colleagues and friends out of his business, how he has been an inspiration to others, that if you have to consider different factors like drug use and addiction and certain medical conditions that were redacted in this filing, but that may all play a role in his anger. And we know the defense definitely tried to explain away a lot of those angry moments, right? The infamous Cassie Ventura beating, that video back in 2016. The defense went into what he was convicted of, how it doesn't warrant significant prison time, that Cassie Ventura and Jane, the key victims and accusers in this case, were part of a consensual sexual relationship with Sean Combs. That's the argument. I mean, and remember, he wasn't convicted of sex trafficking, despite the evidence of freakoffs and wild king nights. So the defense hammers home that there was no force, fraud, or coercion, that the male escorts that make up the transportation to engage in prostitution convictions, they were freely consenting to what happened. They argue, quote, this is the only case we've identified where the government claims professional, consenting adult males were Mann Act victims. The Mann Act refers to transportation to engage in prostitution. They emphasize, and by the way, this comes up again today, that Combs didn't earn any money as part of this prostitution. They emphasize how the guidelines say 6 to 12 months should be the sentence, how the court cannot use any evidence from the racketeering or sex trafficking parts of the case in sentencing him for prostitution, that it would be unconstitutional. They fought back on the enhancers that prosecutors have argued for a more strict sentence. They can't argue fraud, coercion, that Combs wasn't a leader or organizer. And again, they say, look at what he was acquitted of. That would suggest that. And they argue, look, he has already experienced enough punishment by sitting at the notoriously bad MDC for over a year. So they argue for a 14-month sentence. And by the way, in anticipation of sentencing, people have submitted letters of support for Sean Combs to the court. You have a letter from his mother, Janice Combs, who writes in part, I'm writing this letter to implore your honor to please have mercy on my son. Sean has always been a loving and caring son. On December 21st, I will be 85 years old. Goes on, I would like to be able to spend the last few years of my life with my son, Sean. Unfortunately, my son has made some terrible mistakes in his life, which I know he recognizes. His adopted sister, Keisha Combs, wrote, I pray that this moment is not the end of Sean's story, but a turning point toward a more purposeful and honorable life. You even have letters from fellow inmates. You have one from a Raymond Castillo, who writes, Mr. Combs has saved me. Not only striving to better himself, but to better everyone he encounters as a whole and leave a positive impact in everyone's life. Even behind bars and with limited resources, I have witnessed this man do magical things. In a place of segregation, I've seen Mr. Combs bring unity to all races and ethnic groups, no matter the background, as a united front. You have another inmate who writes, because of Mr. Combs, everybody in the unit is treating and acting positively towards each other, and for many people, that's a step forward in becoming a better person for when they get out of prison. So with all of that in mind, right, that's sentencing. Is it even going to happen, or is his convictions going to be thrown out? Because we got about what happened in today's hearing, where Combs tried to get those convictions thrown out. For that, let me bring on, once again, Law and Crime Network's reporter, Elizabeth Milner. Elizabeth, so good to About this again. It's been a few months.
Right.
Thank you so much. First of all, it was a crazy scene getting in. There was a lot of people who tried to, right? You were there since like 6 a.m.
Yes, I was there bright and early, 6:30 a.m. Got there and there was already a line. Now it was mainly a lot of press, but then we had this moment where we could just put our names down on the list, come back later, and then when I came back, it was so many more people. And I was surprised to see how much interest they had for just kind of what I felt to be like a standard procedural hearing. But so many people, I think, wanted to get one of their final glimpses. Before he eventually learns his fate.
Yeah, and how did he look? Because we have the courtroom sketches. In my opinion, he looks skinnier.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Now, I don't want anyone to mistake what I had said, like I did last year with astonishingly thin. None of that. But I did feel like he did look slimmer from trial. But I did think he was kind of in an oversized MDC jumpsuit, which I was really surprised he was wearing, as opposed to kind of what had been ordered by the judge, which was the sweaters, the slacks, all of that stuff. So he came in the tan khaki suit. He kind of beamed up with smiles. I was surprised, given how long it's been since he's seen probably all of us, but I think it was more so the smiles for his family.
His family was there?
His family was there, the entire family too. So that included Keisha Combs, LaWanda Lane, who's been kind of taking care of the twin girls while Sean Combs has been incarcerated. Sarah Chapman, who is the mother of Chance Combs. Chance Combs was there. The twins were there. Janice Combs, Sean Combs' mother, was there.
Good morning, Paris. Yes, she's not the only one living in fear. Last night, watched a video, jaw-dropping. Last night, watched a video, jaw-dropping. So this might be why they're saying the 11 years. Like the video. I'll probably have to do a video on that another day. But yeah. Like the video, you guys, as you come in. Everyone say good morning to Paris.
Charlucci, who's been a fixture every single day of trial.
You had him on sidebar.
Yep, had him on sidebar. I've interviewed him, and so he was there, as well as Quincy.
I will say this. The judge is seeing everything. The judge knows everything. The judge knows everything of where the complaints are, the concerns are, alleged other victims. The judge knows everything.
Around Justin Combs, Christian Combs, and
good morning.
Girlfriend. So it was a really pretty stats, and that was just excluding, including the family. There were still some loved ones there.
Angel soft. Well, it's gotta be soft.
Like the video, fair use reaction clip. Like the videos, you guys come in, and there were certain things that they did not want to be a part of this trial, and the judge knows everything and sees everything.
There were still some loved ones there to support too.
And you guys have to realize there's several things that's redacted. The judge can see what's going on, but we can't see what's going on. So fair use reaction clip.
Have you ever walked out of a meeting and you thought, wait a minute, what did we just decide after all of that? Or maybe you sat through a really good discussion, but you kind of lost track of the action items later on. Look, I've been there. I've no shame in saying it. But
let's
that's why
continue.
I want to bring your attention to our partner, the AI meeting assistant, Brain. It picks up voices from up to 16 feet away.
Hold on.
50-second brain. It can draft privacy standards. So and this is regarding 2 convictions that he got, right? 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution. I mean, it basically says what it is. It's transporting people across state lines for the purposes and internationalized for the purposes of sex work. It doesn't have to be force, fraud, or coercion. It's literally transporting men, Cassie, Jane, that's it. Okay, first issue I understand was about the timing of that motion, right? What happened there?
Yeah, so initially the government was kind of making the argument here, and it was first starting off with Meredith Foster, because I think a lot of people have to remember the lead prosecutor in this case, Maureen Comey, was no longer there because she's been dismissed from her job, which has been reportedly nothing to do with this case or anything like that. That's another story for another day. But Meredith Foster was making these arguments for the government, and it seems like at first they were kind of talking about challenging the jury instruction, particularly, and they cited some cases, one from 2025, USA versus Kelly, and how the defendant in that case argued on appeal that it was unconstitutionally vague for Mann Act and RICO conspiracy. But the government was pretty much arguing that this should have been raised pre-trial. They were citing cases from 2003, 1973, just about the broader concerns. But the government was saying it felt like the defense was kind of taking a second bite of the apple. They were encouraging, the government was saying that the defense is encouraging the defendant to raise these claims afterwards. It says that the defense didn't raise these issues until even after trial, and kind of raised during the indictment phase. Whereas Alexandra Shapiro, who was making the defense arguments, she was saying that the law in Rule 12 is extremely restrictive, and she says that there's no way to make this argument at an earlier point because this was kind of a result of the acquittal because he was found not guilty of RICO conspiracy and sexual victim 1 and Jane, victim 1 being Cassie Ventura. And so the defense was saying that they were unable to make that argument any earlier, and so they were kind of trying to do it now.
Substantive in prior filings by the defense. One of them is, if I'm understanding correctly, Sean Combs did.
You're buffering? You're buffering? Let me see if I am on my side. I think I'm okay on my side though. Okay, you were. Okay, Paris, get your pen ready because I'm gonna have you look up this of what I was watching last night. The Music Recording Network. Go look that up for tonight.
Didn't make any money off of this prostitution, or he didn't pay for it himself, right?
The Music Recording Network. It was last night.
So initially they were going to be asking kind of 4 questions, and that both sides had to answer these questions. So this was brought up during question 2 about whether or not the Mann Act prosecution had a financial motive, and whether or not the defendant kind of fall under the second liability, which is something I completely didn't know about because I'm not a lawyer. But it was interesting kind of hearing those arguments. So the defense starting off, that also being Alexandra Shapiro, she was saying that the statute should be construed narrowly to pimps and prostitution. She said that Mr. Combs was an alleged consumer, and that this is just kind of a wire type of case. And it seemed like that's what the defense's whole argument was, that he was just financially giving the money, but it wasn't that he was necessarily making the money. And so the judge said, well, why wouldn't Combs be liable for willfully, under that willfully causing theory? And the defense said no, because it's talking about the transportation aspect and the mens rea is that people would engage. Yes, exactly. And the intent that people would engage in prostitution, you can't say that he's willfully doing that necessarily, because he, in essence, was just watching 2 people have sex, pretty much. And so the defense was talking about the money aspect and how they previously argued that, the money was for time. It wasn't necessarily for sexual purposes. It wasn't that typical prostitute situation like that they were trying to make that comparison to. And so that it seems to imply that Sean Combs' conviction was based off the money transaction.
You guys are buffering? Hold on.
It was very easy for the jury to draw those conclusions about this is how much money was paid. This is what this when this flight happened, and the jury found in essence that when these hotel nights were happening, that this was for pretty much the process of transporting people across state lines for the purposes of prostitution. Whereas the government was saying that
now she's fast, but I'm not buffering on either side. I'm wondering if you guys have to go out and go back in.
Conviction should still stand, and the defense is challenging the vagueness and the definition of prostitution specifically. And so the government said that this issue isn't whether the defendant himself engaged in prostitution, and specifically in sexual acts, it's whether the defendant transported a person across state lines or international lines for the purposes of sex. And so the government argued that he facilitated the transportation with intent, and even though Cassie and Jane, and that's kind of where that first liability, secondary liability come in, where Cassie and Jane were the ones that the government was kind of saying were the ones who were contacting these entertainers or these escorts, but it was Diddy or Sean Combs who had that second liability because he watched, but he also provided the money.
Like he aided and abetted.
Yes, exactly. And
because it's not like a traditional case where someone, had this organization that was shipping off prostitutes to different people on this wide network. Yeah, but that's not necessarily what's required of this law. You can transport people across lines for the purposes of sex work. And I hear that, argument.
And I was going to say, the defense kind of brought it back too later, where they were saying that the government hasn't raised to the jury the secondary liability, and that speaks volumes. So Alexandra Shapiro making that argument, and she says that they don't contest that the money came from Sean Combs. That's what I thought was interesting in their argument.
Your perfect wedding begins at this.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. There's about 218 in the building. Please hit subscribe and thank you. Please hit subscribe and thank you. Let's get the likes up. There's only 11 likes. The likes should match the views. Please double tap that screen. Hit the thumbs up above the video, below the video. Let's get the likes up. 11 likes. And there's almost been 3,000 people in here. Get the likes up.
Don't you remember during the trial how much evidence was there?
Yeah.
That the money either came from him, or he was on the phone,
yeah,
or there were voice notes or messages, right? That he was directing all of it.
Exactly. And so, in kind of that last hurrah to save this argument, the defense said that the Mann Act actually historically is an embarrassment to the United States, because that's where they kind of brought in that racial undertone that it was.
Can you explain that? They've said consistently it's racist. What did they say about that? And then we'll get into the constitutional arguments, which I think are really interesting. But before that, what did they say about it being racist?
Well, this is an argument that they've made previously, right? This was an argument that they've been making for months on end, where essentially the law was drafted a long time ago in different times and different ages, where it's really just kind of talking about the slave trade, transporting persons across state lines. And so what the defense was pretty much saying, that the purposes of this law in general in 2020 and the 2025 lens is not intended for what it was initially made for. And so what they're saying is nowadays that the DOJ, Department of Justice, is pretty much only prosecuting where it is kind of that typical sex trafficking in a way, people across state lines or minors. And so I think the defense's whole point that they were trying to drive home was that these were who were coming across state lines. And what I thought was interesting too, Jesse, is I'm wondering if the money transaction wasn't there, if the prosecution wasn't able to find these money points, would we even be sitting here today?
Commercial can just mean something of value. So if the escorts were receiving something of value to engage in this work, or the argument would be Jane or Cassie were receiving something of value in exchange
like a fancy gift.
Yeah, I think they could make that argument. But you also do have money trap.
Yes, he did have
as well. I mean, they did make their argument in prior filings suggesting he's a prominent black man who's being prosecuted for this, that it's not a tag along of like you see in other cases of a large sex trafficking network. He was convicted of that and that alone. And it does raise the question, if all they ever had were those charges and not racketeering and not sex trafficking, would they have even brought this case?
Yeah, and that's what the defense also pointed out today too.
We have to get into this First Amendment argument. Now, I've talked about this on a previous sidebar because it was in one of the defense's filings. This is a novel argument. This is very interesting. They're basically saying he is protected by the First Amendment and that this is simply voyeurism? Explain this to us.
Yes, and so that came up in question 4, which was answered before question 3. So just a little bit of out of order, but the question was whether the records show if every time an escort traveled across state lines or international lines were these encounters, hotel nights, freakoffs, where they always filmed. And so, and the other part 2 of that question was, does it even really matter? And so the government, in essence, was saying that no, it doesn't really matter, and that escorts were routinely filmed, and that the evidence at trial showed that while he frequently filmed the hotel nights or the freakoffs, he also talked about the exhibits showing the sex tapes, and those exhibits also correlate with the travel records. But the government says it's irrelevant, especially to talk about it, because the Mann Act is all about transportation and not necessarily filming. And so the government said that the act that violated the law was transportation. So when he transported the individuals across state lines, it was for the purposes of sex, that he's not just this amateur porn producer. Whereas the defense says, well, it doesn't matter if he always filmed the freakoffs or not, that he was a producer and a consumer of pornography, or amateur porn as they had called it, and that's protected by the First Amendment. And so Alexandra Shapiro, she said that he had a right as a consumer in order to, I guess, take part in them in a way, I should say, and that adults have the right to consume pornography. Jane even brought up TV, something that we heard during testimony during the trial, so that way they could watch it during their movie nights, just videos of them in their hotel nights. And so the judge was like, well, what does this really have to do with the conviction for First Amendment issue? And then the defense kind of brought up OnlyFans, and just in essence that it's not illegal to consume it because he wasn't necessarily partaking in it. But I thought it was kind of an interesting argument.
I think their strongest part is not every encounter was filmed, right? If you're saying, well, he was just filming it for personal use, well, not every one of them was filmed. And they say it's about criminalizing traveling for prostitution, traveling for commercial sex. They talked about the Supreme Court case O'Brien, and that's where the Supreme Court upheld a federal law that said it was illegal to destroy draft cards. There was no First Amendment protection, and the court created what's called the O'Brien test for determining whether expressive conduct or symbolic speech, does it merit being protected by the First Amendment? The government would need to show significant government interest here. So here...
To catch you up, yes, the prosecutors want Diddy to get 11 years. What will the judge decide? We'll see. Many people have wrote letters, and Cassie basically saying she's still in fear. Many people said they're allegedly still in fear. So that's the catch up. Everyone's reporting that the prosecution want him to get 11 years. Now, what will the judge decide? We don't know. Let's continue. Fair use, reaction clip. And you got to remember, he may not have came in contact with the other people that were hired, but he was playing the juices. He may not have wanted to interact, but he was playing the juices. And some of their stuff was to be collected. Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip. There's about 400 people in the building. Please hit subscribe. 400 people in the building. Please hit subscribe and thank you. Let's continue.
What is the government's interest in policing this and criminalizing what he did? What is it? It's that just to regulate? Yeah.
Well, honestly, first, Jesse, you should have been inside that courtroom to give us all that little rundown of what O'Brien meant. Because I truly was like, O'Brien. Write down O'Brien so I can find it in my notes. Because again, no phone, no computer, nothing. Wasn't able to Google it. But the government said that that regulating prostitution is of government interest. They say it's important to discourage violence against women, illegal drug use, preventing sexual assault. And they say within all 50 states there are laws regulating prostitution, and all 50 states, depending on which state you're in, determine if there is a substantial issue. And so the government was arguing that prohibiting transportation can help with the goal of thwarting prostitution, because I know people, and the defense specifically, have kind of just been chalking up the case to this is just a private matter, this is what's going on, and the government's trying to police what's going on in adults' bedroom. And so the defense said, well, this is expressive conduct that's protected by...
Hold on, let's get these likes up. There's about 250 people in the building, and I got 14 likes. Let's double tap that screen to get the likes up, and thank you. Let's get the likes to 100. Double tap the screen. If you're watching from a phone, press 1. If you're watching from a phone, press 1 or hit the thumbs up above the video, below the video. 15 likes, and there's been about 3,000, 4,000 people in here. Let's get the likes up. Thank you.
The First Amendment, and that the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and their policy confirming as such. That's what the defense was arguing. And so the defense argued that the DOJ, they prosecute cases with minors and specifically with sex workers. Because again, remember, even though they call the men entertainers or escorts, the defense has been very adamant that these men were not prostitutes. And even the ones that testified, the Punisher as well, or Sheree Hayes and Daniel Phillips, they had testified that they were paid for time, that they weren't necessarily prostitutes, but did admit that they do specialized events in those that sort. But the defense said that these were consenting adults. It occurred in the privacy of hotel rooms or in someone else's home. It wasn't like that they were at a massage parlor or a room kind of in what I'm talking about. And so the defense argued that this was pretty much a private matter. And so the government came back and said that this was laid out in several previous submissions that the defense put in, and that they were all denied. But it was interesting just kind of hearing those arguments about O'Brien and learning more about O'Brien today.
Like the video, fair use reaction clip. Continue to hit the subscribe. There's about 372. Please hit subscribe and thank you. Let's continue. Yes, if you're watching from a phone or a tablet, double tap the screen. YouTube makes it easy. Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip. Double tap the screen.
About which way he's going to rule on this, because I understand he didn't make a decision, but he did, didn't he at one point, he's like, if you have a businessman who pays for his client to be with a prostitute,
and the client participates in sexual acts with this prostitute, is the businessman liable, or is this businessman a prostitute? Yeah,
is it transportation?
Exactly.
And away.
Yeah,
is it prostitution?
Yeah,
and I mean, he asked that because he did. And what was the response? But also, did it give you a sense that he's not believing the defense's arguments?
Well, I think there were little tidbits where I felt that way sometimes, and I feel like Judge Arun Subramanian, he does a very great job in really just fleshing out what both sides want. He's leveling and asking questions, making sure, okay, if I'm understanding this correctly, you want this and this. So to answer your first question, the defense said that no, it's not prostitution. And again, they believe that that's where their client's position really is. And so I felt like, from what I could think, because I'm not in the judge's mind or anything like that, it seems like he's leaning toward, possibly leaning towards no on the defense motions. I feel like sentencing will go on as usual on October 3rd. And the reason I say that is because he said, guys, next Friday. So I think he already has in his mind that sentencing will go for it, but whether or not he'll side with the defense as sentencing or the government as sentencing will be interesting.
So 2 points there. A, he said that he'll make a decision. He might make a decision on this soon, but nothing today about sentencing.
Nothing today about sentencing. Not even a time. We don't even know the time yet.
But it is October 3rd.
It is October 3rd.
And you're going to be there.
And I will be there.
And one thing I will say about sentencing, and I think that this might work to the advantage of the prosecutors, the disadvantage of the defense. Yes, they can make the argument that these charges, these convictions are minor, considering what we're talking about with racketeering and sex trafficking, what he was acquitted of. But I've always said, I think it's the amount of times. Yeah. The amount of times that he did this. It wasn't a one-off. It was multiple times.
And y'all got to remember, when he was to be arrested and turn himself in, he had the room set up for another FO. Remember that? When he got arrested, remember they arrested him in the lobby? They looked at his hotel. It was set up for another FO. Let's continue. Yeah, as long as your opinions are welcome here, as long as you're kind and considerate. Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip. And now he's doing trainings in the prison. He had to make himself look good because everybody was like, what have you been doing and what have you been working on? Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip.
Multiple sex workers. And
yes, not vulgar.
Today about that. Did they mention that, the prosecution?
Yeah, absolutely. The government, kind of in their last part of their arguments overall, they were pointing out that Sean Combs also had a history of violence during these freakoffs. He talked about the 2016 Intercontinental Hotel incident and what happened there, what happened as late as June of 2024 with Jane. And so the government, in their last kind of argument to the judge before we were all dismissed, was that Sean Combs had planned these out. Coordinated these all for his sexual pleasure. So while the defense was kind of pointing out that it was maybe Jane or Cassie who had been in communication with these escorts or entertainers, they said it was all because it was at the direction of Sean Combs for his sexual pleasure and sexual gratification. And the government said, don't forget why we were here. This has been going on for years, 15 years they pointed out, 2009 to 2024. So it seems like, for me, and again, not a lawyer or anything like that, but it seems like when the judge takes into consideration the sentencing, he might take into consideration the full scale of everything from the trial and not specifically the flight logs or that some seemed more willing to participate than at other times. So it'll be interesting to see.
We'll see if we're right or wrong.
Yeah,
come next week.
Shall.
Elizabeth Milner, great to see you again.
Great to see you too. Thank you.
Like the video. Fair use reaction clip. I think from the information I just gave Paris and Anonymous, there's going to be information that's going to come out. So I'll just leave it at that. The judge sees everything, and the judge knows everything. Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip. Let's continue.
Victims are going to be abused, and I think people's imaginations went to one level. Then you sat through, well, you read about it because there were no cameras in the trial, and it was like, all right, well, he's kind of just a weirdo sitting in the corner in this room while these people were having sex with his girlfriends. It was a little different than I think people thought, but that video at the elevator, there's nothing you have to say about it. That's a million words. I mean, that's it. That's something that he can never really get away with. That behavior really hit people hard. So, what actually was going on? And the question that we are going to start off with is Sean Diddy Combs a predator or a voyeur? Just the weirdo in the hotel room, or was he an absolute monster? Cassie Ventura talked about it. Here to help us answer this question is the host of the Outlier podcast and pop crime television reporter Lauren Conlon. Ladies, thank you for your time. And trial attorney, former prosecutor Katie Fang is with us. This is, I don't know, before the trial, the weird details of these freakoffs was just sort of out there, that they had these issues, these parties. And then when it came down to it, we learned a lot more of what was specifically going on. What's your take to that question? Lauren, you first.
Yes, I mean, I sat through the entire trial, and I said at the beginning, I'm not trying to help the guy out. He clearly has a lot of problems. He should have been convicted years ago on aggravated assault, but I do take issue with the government treating him like he's some kind of Sinaloa cartel sex trafficker here. And look, the jury acquitted him on this. They acquitted him of the most serious charges, sex trafficking and racketeering. So here we are, we're left with the 2 Mann Act charges. I was actually in court yesterday when his appellate lawyer was arguing that these charges should actually be dropped because the Mann Act is outdated, it's racist, and it's frankly, and this is, her words, and I'm paraphrasing, it's a disgrace to the Constitution. And she even cited some cases where judges and juries don't even uphold the Mann Act here. And another thing about this, I think both the government and the defense agree that the term prostitution here, it is constitutionally vague. So in my opinion, when it does come to sentencing next week, it's going to be a huge battle of case law, if you will. But I mean, just going back to your original question, I sat through the whole trial. Yes, I felt like pieces of my soul I will never get back. I learned way too much about this man's personal life and what he prefers in the bedroom. He is absolutely not perfect. He is verbally and physically abusive, in certain instances, but he wasn't on trial for that. So it's, again, it feels wrong to say it, I guess, because he
and y'all got to remember what happened in regards to that video. Didn't they get that video, paid for the video? What was the expectation of what he did with Cassie's mother? Asking the mother for money so he wouldn't release the video on Cassie. What happened? Asked for the mother for money, gave the money to him, and then allegedly he gave the money back. You can't tell me this is not a controlled situation, a concerning situation, and what these women went through was concerning. I don't think the judge has a lot of information that we don't know. That's all I can say.
That's hurt so many women, but we're talking about the law, and I'm not a lawyer, but this is my opinion.
Katie, your thoughts?
Well, the jury did its job, and to Lauren's point, right, the jury could have returned a verdict if it...
Okay, Paris, that's what I need you to watch. What I just told you the name of, watch that, and you will see what I'm talking about. Like the video.
Found that the evidence as presented by the prosecution met the elements of the crimes that were charged against this particular defendant. And I think that is the reason why the judge in this case, as he's contemplating whether or not he's going to grant a motion for a new trial or he's going to set aside the jury's verdict, I think the judge is going to say no, because the jury went through the specific charges, spent time deliberating, and was able to actually thoughtfully set aside the video surveillance, right? All of the allegations of physical abuse, and they were able to come to a determination that only 2 of those federal charges fit with the evidence, and it met the burden of proof that the prosecution had. I also think that if there is an issue with either the constitutionality of the Mann Act
Whether or not it is now outdated, or if it's racist, or it doesn't have applicability anymore, I think the judge is going to say, that's not within my purview to make those determinations. That's something that needs to be done by the legislatures. It's not my job. Now listen, this day and age, there's a lot of blurring in terms of the separation of powers, right? But this judge has shown that through a multi-week trial, through a lot of evidence, that there's been a lot of pre-trial motions. Remember, this idea that was presented by the defense that's being argued now in terms of the sentencing, that he should not be jailed, case that perhaps you and I would have when it comes to things that happen behind closed doors. That was a theme that ran through the entirety of the defense's case, and the jury could have rejected that when it came to the Mann Act charges, but it chose to convict him for those two.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you know, Lauren sort of touched on earlier, technically he's facing the...
Should we question the jury? Are you guys satisfied with the jury's decision was? Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip.
Prosecution, you know, he was found guilty of these prostitution-related charges. And it's, you know, it's not... It is weird. The facts of this case are weird. And, you know, when you look at the, I guess, quote, victims, the prostitutes are talking about, you know, males like the Punisher Hayes coming in and being, you know, flown to Los Angeles or wherever and going through this. He was on with us. And let's take a listen to what he said about what Sean Combs' behavior was like during the freakoffs.
He never partakes. He's always, for the most part, a great distance away. And almost all of his interactions was just directions in terms of visual cues, body positioning, you know, a suggestion of maybe more oil. And if there was further suggestions, I didn't hear him because there was a routine. If they needed to have a conversation, he would stand up at times and just walk out of the room. And Ms. Ventura would take that as a cue, leave the room with him. They would have a brief conversation, be going for a period of time, and then she would return and we would resume. And sometimes with her resuming, she would give me instructions or the act or something would change. But I don't know if that was directly from him or her, but I know all of the communications were outside of an environment for me to see or hear. So I can't give you the real structure or means of where the directions came from.
Lauren, you were in the courtroom at the end of the day hearing all the testimony about these freakoffs. Was he directing porn? Or what was his role in your opinion?
Now, because something that AUSA Slavic said yesterday was Mr. Combs or the defendant was not an amateur porn director. But it was argued that it was his right to do this if he wanted to film it. He did not film every single freak-off, every single hotel night. But yeah, we heard a lot of this. We heard that sometimes he directed, you know, we heard sometimes Cassie or Jane appeared to enjoy it. We heard this from third parties, and it's also interesting because Judge Subramanian specifically asked the government to bring case examples to sentencing, and I wrote it down, where person A transports person B to have sex with person C, because this is kind of rare. It's not, you know, it's not super common. So, you know, Slavic said, well, I don't have examples now, but yes, I will bring them, you know, next week. So I think the fact that the government is essentially asking for, I think, close to 4 years on really what is a prostitution charge where the defendant or the convicted didn't have any type of financial gain is also really interesting. It's really strange. You don't see a lot of this here. I will say, I do think Judge Subramanian is under a lot of pressure just because of the media, and I hate to say it, but because Diddy's reputation is not great, and I think so many people who were not in the courtroom, and you know, it wasn't televised, and they just kind of read headlines, they sit there and they're horrified. This man got away with so much. Well, guys, he really didn't. Again, like you said, if you were in the courtroom, that's not really how it went down. So I don't envy the judge in this situation, because I do think it's going to be difficult. However, if he does get anything more than 14 months time served, maybe let's say 6 months extra tops, I'll be shocked. I will be shocked.
Well, we will find out. Lauren, thank you for your insights and your valuable time on this Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Katie's going to stick around. Coming up next, more VPI. Can Diddy's career recover?
My two best friends were just murdered.
Please hit the subscribe button. There's about 167 in the building. Please getting an update on the Diddy trial, the court case, what happened in court, what's coming, what will his future look like. Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip. Hold on 1 second.
The darkest times in your life, sometimes you gotta do that. I
was disgusted then when I did it, I'm disgusted now.
As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity.
Sean Diddy Combs continues to serve time as he awaits his formal sentencing for the 2 counts that he was found guilty of in his federal trial. The government wants him to do up to 4 years in prison. His defense says, not so fast. He should be out on time, sir. The bottom line is he's going to get out. And then what? What will happen to his career? We're going to talk about that. But first, here's Court TV's Kelly Craft with a look at the rise and fall of Sean Diddy Combs.
Sean Combs was born and raised in Harlem. His father died when Combs was just 3 years old. His mother told him he had died in a car accident, but that was not true. Here's Combs' 2014 commencement speech at Howard University.
I went to the library and I did some research. And when I typed in my father's name and the day he died, I read in the Amsterdam News that he had been murdered and a drug deal gone bad.
In 1990, as a student at Howard University, he received an internship at Uptown Records. Combs left college and worked his way up at Uptown, but was fired in 1993. He started his own label, Bad Boy, and released Biggie's debut album.
It was all a dream. I used to read word up.
Like the video, fair use, reaction clip. I don't need that to be a problem.
Everybody became friends, and a lot of people, really kept friendships from that. It was something that I just did every summer.
Combs started a fashion line in 1998. In 1999, he was charged with attacking a music executive and sentenced to an anger management course. And while with his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez at a club, a shooting took place, wounding 3 people. He was charged with gun possession and with offering his driver money to take the rap. He was acquitted.
So if he was charged with possession, how are they saying he has no record? Let's continue. Fair use reaction clip.
At trial in 2001.
I just want to say I give all glory to God.
By 2004, Combs was on TV, in movies, and still making hit music. He performed at the Super Bowl halftime show. In 2007, he began his multi-million-dollar partnership with Ciroc Vodka. In the fall of 2023, his empire started to crumble. Just after releasing his first album in 17 years, his ex-girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie, sued him for abuse and rape. And in September 2024, he was arrested on federal charges.
All right, so the question now that we are going to tackle, it's pretty basic. Once he's out, can Diddy's career recover? Let's talk about it with the editor-in-chief of Hip Hop Inquirer magazine, Dennis Byron, is here, and entertainment host Holland Reed also joining us on this Friday night. Dennis, your thoughts? He'll be out maybe sooner than later. To what extent will others want to collaborate, or are we staying clear? What do you see in your crystal ball for his career once he's out?
My question about collaboration is interesting. And the reason why I say that is I was in the courtroom pretty much every day watching the trial and seeing who came in and showed up at the courthouse. I don't think the collaboration, even on his side, made him want. But I think that with his children being 2 of them, King Combs and one of his other children being in music, he might not be so interested in getting around the same people he's around prior to having these charges brought upon him. Will he be able to bounce back? Not like the Diddy of early 2000s or even the late 98, 97, but I think there's still some type of opportunity out there for him to do music or mentor others.
Colin, what's your take?
My take is this is going to be one major mountain for him to climb. This is going to be a moral pivot for him. This is going to be a PR tour from the gods if he can get back on track. The thing is, we all saw too much. We saw too much. Even though, like your previous guest said, he was not on trial for abuse or sexual assault or any of those things, but we saw it all. And unfortunately, that's something that is going to follow him for the rest of his life. We're talking about brand deals, festivals, events. I think the trust has been lost. It doesn't matter what he liked in the bedroom or what he liked behind closed doors or what have you. It all becomes that he used it in an abusive way to sustain power.
he's been protected by his celebrity for so long. So I do think that at this time, if anything, he's going to probably try to be in control like he has done his entire career in his life. And that's probably him monetizing his own story, monetizing his own redemption story, maybe, his own documentaries. I just don't see him getting back in the good graces of those who he's hurt along the way, because we absolutely saw too much. Now, we might have a younger generation that doesn't really know him or doesn't really care, but I think the people that either are loyal to him will stay loyal, but the people that saw what we saw during this entire trial are definitely keeping their hands off of him moving forward, unless there is a miracle that comes down and he's got to do a complete moral pivot, I think.
Dennis, any chance he just goes away, stays by himself and sort of is done?
Okay, first of all, I'm going to have to disagree with your guess. Mr. Combs has done a lot of good in the music industry. He's helped a lot of careers. If you've attended as many parties that I've attended, that he's hosted, not freak-off parties, but regular parties, it was the who's who. The now president even attended his parties. I don't think that just being in the room with him.
Allegedly. Let's continue. Please subscribe. Please subscribe. Let's continue.
Brings a certain energy. And I saw a lot in the trial, and I saw a lot that kind of dispelled some of the misinformation that was out there. So I think he'll bounce back. It won't be a rapid bounce back, but I think that with the marketing skills that he has and the team he puts around him, I think he'll be okay.
Holland, a final word?
I will agree and also disagree. I can play both sides of that coin. Yes, he did help a lot of people in his careers. Yes, he did bring a lot of people up in the industry with him. But what we saw was an abusive, drug-fueled, angry, unhinged CEO that used power, manipulation, coercion to get his way over decades, and it's been known for decades. I don't care how many wonderful, beautiful white parties that he had. He was doing a million other things behind closed doors that maybe just because you did not see it and you didn't go to them, that were happening and that affected people's lives for the rest of their lives, and they will never be able to get over. So while I agree with you, he is definitely a mogul and a monumental. He's a monument in the music industry, a mogul in this industry. That does not negate his abuse and the harm that he has caused within the industry and people's lives as well.
All right, let's leave it there. I guess you're going to stick with us. Up next, what do we really know about these freakoffs?
Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freakoffs.
Like the video, like the video.
His world would change dramatically when he was arrested in September of 2024, and more details about his parties he called freakoffs started emerging. He did escape the fate of life in prison after acquittals on the two most serious charges he was facing in his high-profile federal trial. He's still locked up, awaiting sentencing for a conviction on two charges related to prostitution, which carry a total of possibly 20 years in prison, but his attorneys think he should only spend a few more months behind bars. And it, of course, will be up to a judge to how long he spends in prison. The government wants 4 years. That's at the top end. Technically, if he was sentenced to the max, it would be 20 if you combine the two charges. Not going to happen. So the government wants 4. Defense wants him out today. Get him out. They believe that he shouldn't be in prison for.
And then last night we heard that they're seeking 11 years. Let's continue.
Just being weird. That's basically what was brought into trials, that he had these freakoffs, and that he would hire people in, Sheree Hayes, who they called the Punisher, to come in, and he would perform-ish, have sex with Cassie, and Sean would sit there and watch, and that's about it. Well, we talked to Sheree about it, and he talked about Sean's role, I guess, in these freakoffs. Here's what he said.
While we were in the acting mode, it wasn't really any conversation between me and her, other than us playing our roles. And as I was not supposed to acknowledge Mr. Combs, he didn't acknowledge or speak to me in any way. He would give subtle directions to Ms. Ventura in regards to more of lighting situations. The room was candlelit, it was kind of dim, so he would give instructions in terms of move the candles a little bit more, position your body this way. Even if it was something for me to do, he would ask her to ask me, have him move to the left. So it was a very diligent, deliberate effort to avoid any interactions with me directly.
That was the Punisher talking to Court TV. That gets us to our next question in the investigation. What do we really know about these freakoffs? Well, let's bring back Dennis Byron and Holland Reed. Dennis, you were in the courtroom during most of this trial. What was your take on what was going on in these freakoffs?
It appears that Diddy's into voyeurism. It appears that Diddy is into amateur filmmaking. Doesn't appear that he did anything outside of the lifestyle that those who are into voyeurism do, with the exception of putting his hand on Cassie in a violent way. but it appears based on even your guess, the Punisher's assessment of what he witnessed, it does appear that he was into voyeurism and filming it. And Cassie, too, from what I've learned from this trial, she bought him a TV so they can watch it together. This sounds like behavior of 2 or more consenting adults. Doesn't sound like he was doing anything outside the lifestyle that he was living with his girlfriends.
Holland, one part of the equation is that Cassie did testify to, and Dennis mentioned that there was some abuse that went along with the freakoffs at times if he was upset. What's your overall take on all of this?
Wow, what a loaded question. My take is, I think somewhere along the lines of a lot of this conversation tonight, we have forgotten that this trial also involved arson. This trial also involved Diddy, his assistants being abused, not being able to change their tampons, being kidnapped, being held being forced to the freakoffs, the elevator video of Cassie actually trying to leave a freakoff. I think that what happens in those freakoffs is what happens. I think there's so much we just don't know. And those who are willing participants, okay, they're grown adults. Hopefully all of them were grown adults. But at the end of it, we saw too much. The freakoffs were a part of his abuse. They were a part of his grooming. Now, whether Cassie liked it sometimes and not sometimes, liked it sometimes and other times she did not, that's Cassie's prerogative. I think that was a little bit damning for the case. But the overall arching of this whole thing is that we keep forgetting this was not just about freakoffs. It was about freakoffs being a tool for his abuse and his blackmailing and his coercion. And I think that's been lost a lot in this conversation. But to sum that up, as far as the freakoffs and what do I think of all of this, I think it's a mess. And I think you're right. It's just very weird. I think we've seen too much. I think we don't want to know the intricacies of what goes on in people's bedrooms. But when you're using it in a power dynamic to control business, to manipulate other artists, stars, rising artists, that's where the problem lies. That's where the RICO charge did not stay. But unfortunately, here we are. And I do believe this will end up being a slap on the wrist.
Here's more from the Punisher.
The furniture in the living room were all covered in sheets. Bowls of warm water with bottles of baby oil in it. And she explained that we were going to create this. I was going to put baby oil on myself. She was going to do the same. We may oil each other. And eventually her husband would come out and watch at some point. And I was specifically instructed that when her husband came out to not look at him, don't talk to him, try my best to not acknowledge him. We're supposed to act like he's not even present.
Dennis, did you get the feeling that, listening to the testimony, that he was an unhinged, maniacal, just sort of self-absorbed, powerful person that is abusing that power, or a weirdo in the corner watching his lover have sex with other people?
Use the term weirdo. I use the term him being in a lifestyle. I'm not in that lifestyle. We poll 20 people that are in that lifestyle, they may have a different opinion on his behavior. I've never sat in a room watching someone make love to my woman. No one gets that pleasure. But I would say this. There has been a lot said about him and the alleged abuse of these 2 women, but he's charged with 2 man acts. He did not participate physically with these entertainers. There are 2 people that didn't get charged with the man acts, and they're witnesses against him. And they actually participated in the prostitution. He did. He was in the corner watching. Yeah, that's a problem.
Let's hear from Cassie. This was testimony. Now, this is through AI because no cameras were in that.
Please hit the subscribe button. There's about 133 in the building. Please hit the subscribe button and thank you. It's just one click. Continue to hit the like button. It's just one click. Double tap the screen to hit the like or hit the thumbs up above the video, below the video. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. We're trying to hit 50K by end of next month.
Courtroom, but this is the transcript of what she said on the witness stand, talking about the freakoffs from her perspective.
How much money did Sean pay to settle your lawsuit? $20 million. So would you give that money back if it meant you never had to have freakoffs? Objection.
It's overruled.
I'd give that money back if it meant I never had to have freakoffs. If never had to have freakoffs, I would have agency and autonomy, and I would... Objection.
It's overruled.
You can continue, Ms. Ventura. I wouldn't have to work so hard to get it back. And when you say get it back, are you talking about the agency and autonomy that you mentioned? Yeah. Do you remember when defense counsel asked you yesterday if freakoffs were a special time that you cherished? Yeah. How would you describe the experience of an escort urinating in your mouth while you were on the floor?
We understand that that's something that transpired. Gross. Trigger warning. Let's continue. Fair use ration clip.
Stained.
How many times did Sean insist you have a freak-off when you still had a UTI?
All the time. Frequently.
And did Sean beat you during freak-offs?
Yes.
Once or more than once?
More than once.
How did you feel during the freak-offs when Sean beat you?
Worthless, just like dirt. Like I didn't matter to him. But that I was nothing. Like absolutely nothing.
At the beginning of your relationship, were you open to freak-offs?
I was open in the very beginning to trying it.
Did defense counsel show you a number of messages that reflected some of that openness over the past 2 days?
Yeah.
Did that openness change?
Over time, yeah.
And after it changed, did you want to have freak-offs?
I didn't.
Did you feel that you could say no?
No.
Alan, he wasn't charged with abusing Cassie. That elevator video had nothing to do with the charges against him. But as we talked about earlier, if he's ever going to come back, these are the things. This is the problem, right?
This is absolutely the problem, and even when your guest said, he believes that he's just a voyeur, it's not just that. I mean, this is a man that is literally saying, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then X, Y, and Z will happen to you. That's past being a wannabe amateur porn producer, okay? That is an abuser. That is someone who is literally using his power. He's using.
Yeah, and think about it. He would have her in situations for days with different partners, sometimes no protection. And sometimes allegedly those people caught situations. So that's the thing that he wasn't even paying attention. If she has a health concern, it's almost like, continue. You'll deal with it in a few days. So concerning. Controlling. Not worried about her at all. So
I think that trying to paint him as just a wannabe producer is making light of the severity of this situation. This was someone that drugged people with baby oils. This is someone that, threatened people if they didn't perform in his voyeurism. That is where this comes down to. This is not just about just the RICO trial. This is about his moral character. While I'm not judging him, he can do whatever he wants.
Is that a valid point? That this was two-pronged? Yes, he had the predilection for the voyeurism, but then also he was abusive and off the rails.
Let's get the record straight. He was never charged with drugging anyone. That is a mischaracterization of what happened in the courtroom. He did drugs, they did drugs, but he never drugged anyone. So let's, we're not going to, there's enough slander done in this case. Let's just focus on the behavior. The behavior, some of the things he did that Cassie testified to, problematic. However, she in 2018 got involved with him again while she was dating the trainer that he paid for. So she's a grown adult. She has to take some kind of responsibility. And I didn't read anywhere that she donated any of that money that she received from the Intercontinental or the 20 billion.
Relax and have a good weekend. Maybe not a freak-offy weekend, but just a good weekend. Dennis, thank you. Alan, thank you. Still to come. Does Diddy have a good chance of getting out after he's...
Why should she have to donate? Did she ever say she was supposed to donate? Anybody hear about that? Why should she have to donate? If she was in pain, she went through situations. Said anything about donate. It's interesting how some of these people act like they have his back. Why? Like I said, the judge knows a lot. Let's continue. Fair use. Reaction clip. Continue to hit the subscribe, you guys. Continue to hit the subscribe.
Sean Combs has not sexually assaulted anybody. Brutal murders of 2 young girls. Delphi is not one of those.
Hold on. Like the video. Sorry, hold on. Let's continue.